It is now my incredible honor to give a warm California welcome to Dr. Jane Goodall.
Well, thank you for a wonderful welcome and happy International Peace Day to all of you here. Well, here we are, International Peace Day, an amazing parade of peace dogs. There are so many people I want to thank. I cannot start mentioning names because then there will be people whose names I do not mention who will be upset. But I do want to say a very, very special thank you to 4 people who have worked to maintain Roots and Shoots in Los Angeles, to maintain the base camp here, which is the hub of Roots and Shoots in Los Angeles. And they've been with me for years and years, too long for me to remember. And that's Dar and John and Van. Thank you. And there's all the other people who've been working here in Los Angeles. And then there's our amazing Jane Goodall Institute Roots and Shoots team. Some of them have come quite a long way to be here with us today on this International Peace Day. And then there are the volunteers. There are people from government. There are all those who've worked really hard to make the peace dance that you saw on the parade. And finally, I need to mention the LAPD who've been with me right from the very start. So they're here with me today, keeping me safe. I don't believe there's a single person with a dark heart here today. But you know, you all know that in the most peaceful places, suddenly violence can erupt. You never know. So it's always worth to take precautions. So thank you, LAPD. So here we are, UN International Peace Day. And for many, many years I was in the United Nations in New York when the peace bell was rung by the Secretary General of the United Nations. And it always took me back to my childhood. When I was just 5 years old, World War II broke out. I lived through World War II. And at the end of World War II, we all said, never again. And the United Nations Bell of Peace, which is rung once a year, was presented by Japanese school children from metal made in Japan after the war. So you all know that the world is not a very peaceful place. We're here to celebrate. We're here on a wonderful day in California. But could we spend a few seconds now thinking about those people suffering in Ukraine, in Russia, in Gaza, in Israel, in other parts of the world? Could we just be quiet for just a few seconds and think about them and pray that peace will come to them as well? Thank you. Because, you know, all the major religions in the world have the same saying: do to others as you would have them do to you. Do you really think the people who start these wars wish that those who they fight would do the same to them? Of course they don't. Ordinary people want peace. It's only some of the leaders, the mistaken leaders, who are out for their own ends, and they start the wars, and they recruit their young people to go and fight on battlefields where they may be killed and maimed. And think of the suffering mothers and fathers. So this is what we are voting for today. As I say, at the end of World War II, we all said, never again. I've lived on this planet 80 years since then, and during that time, things have not got better. But on the other hand, on this International Peace Day, I want to give a word of hope. And there are many reasons for us to be hopeful. And there's many, many more reasons for us to lose hope. If we lose hope, then doesn't that mean if we lose hope that we fall into apathy? If you don't hope that what you're doing is going to make a difference, why bother? And so people come to me and say, I feel depressed. I feel I've lost hope. The world is in such a mess. I'm one person. There's nothing I can do about it. And so they lose hope. And as many of you know, suicide rates have gone up around the world. So I say to them, you can't change the world. One person can't change the world. But think about where you live. Are there things that bother you? Do you hate the trash on the streets or on the beach? Do you hate the sight of homeless people huddled in doorways? Do you worry about the number of stray dogs? Do you care about the way that we often treat wild animals? Do you care about habitat being destroyed to build yet another shopping mall? And if you do, then see what you can do with a group of your friends to do something about it. And you will find that you can make a difference. I know that you in this part of California know that really well. You know that every individual can make an impact on the planet every single day. And when you get a group of people making an impact every single day, the change that you make collectively is huge. It was because I was meeting so many people who seemed to have lost hope that I began, way back in 1991, our Young People's Program, Environmental and Humanitarian Roots and Shoots. And when I began Roots and Shoots, it was mainly, well, it started in Africa, in Tanzania, and it was a group of high school students. But they were concerned about poaching in the national parks. They were concerned about stream children with no homes. They were concerned about the treatment of stray dogs and many other things. We had a gathering of about 30 high school students, and we formed, in 1991, this program, Roots and Shoots. And right from the beginning, its main message was, every single one of us matters. Every single one of us makes an impact on the planet every single day. And we get to choose what sort of impact we make. And right from the beginning, because I learned in the rainforests of Gombe, where I was studying the chimpanzees, because I learned that everything is interconnected, that an ecosystem is this complex mix of animals and plants, each one with a role to play. We decided that every Roots and Shoots group would choose. They would choose. We wouldn't tell them what to do. They would choose 3 projects, one to help people, one to help other animals, one to help the environment. The projects that they chose would differ from place to place, depending on the age of the young people, because now we have members from kindergarten, even a few preschoolers, through university, and adults are now beginning to form groups. And we decided and understood that in different environments, different projects would be important. The age of the student, the environment they lived in, the culture they lived in, and very often the religion that they were born into. All of those things would influence what they chose to do to make the world a better place. But what wasn't obvious at the beginning is what's happened now. Because in different countries, and Roots and Shoots is now in 70 different countries around the world, and because as often as we can, we like to link groups from different countries, usually virtually, but when we can, face to face. And so young people who care about the environment or people or animals, they're working on the same project, whatever country they come from, whatever religion they come from. And they work together. And they discover in this way that much, much more important than the color of our skin, our language, our culture, even our religion, is the fact we're all human beings. We all cry, we all laugh, we all hope. And so the reason that the United Nations chose me as a messenger of peace was because of Roots and Shoots. So what are we doing as Roots and Shoots to promote world peace? We're growing young people who share a mission, young people who understand the importance of making this a better world. Young people who understand that if we don't protect our environment, if we don't protect biodiversity, the different species, all interdependent, who make up the environment, if we can't protect those things, gradually, we are destroying the natural world. And what more and more people are failing to understand, but what Roots and Shoots and its mentors understand really well, is that not only are we part of the natural world, and it's easy here, isn't it, in a beautiful place like this, to feel part of the natural world, to feel the wind in your face, to look up at the trees and hear the birds and think, oh, how lucky we are to be part of such a beautiful place. But think of those in inner cities. Think of those in war-torn countries. They don't have that wonderful feeling of oneness. So what we really need to understand everywhere is that we actually depend on the natural world for food, for clothes, for water, for everything. But we depend on healthy ecosystems, that complex structure that I described of plants and animals, each one with a role to play. And you know, I see an ecosystem as like a beautiful tapestry, where every strand of that tapestry is interrelated to one of the other strands. And as a species, a plant or animal, disappear from that ecosystem, it's like pulling a thread from the tapestry. And if enough threads are pulled, then the tapestry will hang in tatters and the ecosystem will collapse. And it's when ecosystems collapse that we get things like climate change, loss of biodiversity, the things which threaten us today. Well, the good news, more and more people are becoming aware of these threats. More and more people, like the young volunteers here, are working really hard to do what they can to slow down climate change, to help the world heal some of that harm that we've inflicted. And this is happening all around the world. And it's happening with different cultures, with different religions. And so I see Roots and Shoots and other civil youth programs as developing the leaders of tomorrow, the decision makers. And because we began in 1991, we already have Roots and Shoots members who are in those decision-making positions. And they are making a difference. And I'll give you one example. There was a Roots and Shoots member in Tanzania who got elected to be Minister of Wildlife. And at a time when we had a very you haven't heard yet why you should approach him. I'm going to tell you, at that time we had a president who couldn't care less about the environment. And he started destroying a World Heritage Site to make a dam that would affect the environment for miles around. And he announced on radio and television, anybody who opposes this dam will face the consequences. And at that time, people in Tanzania who opposed the government were disappearing, like in Russia. This young man who had been through Roots and Shoots went to him, knowing he could lose his life, and opposed the dam. Luckily, he only lost his job. But that's Roots and Shoots for you. Now you can applaud him. There's something else that's very important with Roots and Shoots, and that is the way that young people can influence their parents, their grandparents, their teachers, and their friends. And there are many, many examples of this, and I pick out just a few. First of all, I was talking to the CEO of a big international corporation, and he came up to me and he said, "Jane, I want to promise you that for the last 8 years, I've really been trying to get my corporation more ethical, more sustainable in the countries where we source our products, in the supply chain as well as we can, in our offices around the world, their footstep on the natural world, are they conserving energy and so on, and in the way we treat our customers." And he said there were 3 reasons for this fight I'm having. First of all, it was writing on the wall. We're using our natural resources in some places faster than nature can replenish them. Secondly, consumer pressure. People who can afford it, which is most of us gathered here today, are asking questions about the products they buy. Where were they made? Did they harm the environment? Was it cruel to animals, like the terrible intensive factory farming? Is it cheap because of unfair wages? And then I'm not going to buy it. I will seek to buy a product that is more environmentally sustainable. Will it cost a little bit more? Probably, but if something costs that little bit more, you will value it more and you will waste less. And human waste is a huge, huge problem. So, the second story is about a little girl in China, in Chengdu. When I first met her, she was 9 years old, and she couldn't speak a word of English, but she followed me around when I was giving talks. Her parents are quite wealthy, and the parents translated for me. Joy says that she will know English in 2 years so that when you next come to China, she can talk to you. Yes, that happened. I spoke to Joy. Her English was really good. We started a Roots and Shoots group. They did many things in Chengdu to make that place better. But then I had a letter from her mother. Her mother couldn't speak English, but Joy translated it for me. And the mother said, "Until you came, I was just an ordinary housewife. And I went shopping. I didn't ask questions about what I bought. I just bought what I needed." But then Joy told me about that I should think about the environmental impact, the human impact. So I began shopping in a different way. And I talked to my friends and they began shopping in a different way. And then she gave up her job and she started programs for Roots and Shoots. She wrote little plays. She went to the schools. She said, "Jane, your visit changed me. from a person who didn't care to someone who cares about the future of the planet. And that, I think, is a rather amazing story. And in China, we still have over 1,000 active groups right across the country. And groups and shoots just making change. So let me finish off. We are in grim times, like I've said, but there is hope. And my biggest hope is the energy, commitment, dedication, and passion of young people. All of you young people out here, once you understand the problems and we empower you to take action, you are making a difference. And you're making a difference in the way you think about other people in different cultures. Learn about them. Talk to them through roots and shoots or some other way that you can communicate with them. And you understand that just as important as it peace between people, peace between nations, peace between religions, peace with the natural world upon which we depend. You understand that, and you're taking action. You're choosing what projects to do. You're rolling up your sleeves and taking action. And for that I have hope, and for that I thank you. And my second reason for hope is our human intellect. We are different from other animals, more in respect to this explosive development of our intellect than in any other way. We haven't used it wisely, have we? And, you know, animals are way, way, way more intelligent than we used to think. I mean, octopuses, if you haven't watched My Octopus Teacher, watch it. We now know that rats can be taught to do the most amazing things. And the giant hero rats in Africa are being taught to detect landmines buried under the ground after one of the African civil wars. And they're now learning how to detect illegally smuggled wildlife, because in the ports they can climb up the crates and detect illegal ivory or rhino horn or pendulum scales and so on. And they're being taught to go down into the rubble after an earthquake or a bomb and find people who are still alive and signal to their trainer. So rats are amazingly intelligent. Now Google goldfish. Goldfish can be taught to play soccer. If you don't believe me, Google Chinese person who trains goldfish. Bees who've been taught to roll a little bead and drop it into a hole for a reward of nectar. That's interesting in itself. Other bees who have not been trained can do the same thing just by watching the trained bees. So start thinking differently about animals, who they are, and how we should relate to them. Start thinking about the way we treat the animals in the intensive farms. And if you don't know, well, you can Google it. You won't sleep very well afterwards, but it may help you understand moving towards a plant-based diet. It's not only good for the animals, of course, but it's also good for the environment, because miles of habitat are destroyed to grow the grain to feed them, and masses of water is used to change vegetable to animal protein, and also particularly cows produce gas out of their other end, food in one end, gas out the other. That's methane, and that's a really virulent greenhouse gas. And of course, masses of CO2 emissions are caused by intensive farming, whether animals, crops, or anything else. So finally, at last, we're beginning to use our intellect in ways to benefit the planet and the future of our young people. And, you know, alternative energy and things of that sort are all beginning to help. We've got a long way to go, but we're making a good start. Next reason for hope, the environment is so resilient. Places we have totally destroyed. Give the environment time and perhaps some help, and once again, beauty will return. You've got many examples in California. I don't need to go through them. I was just with a group that have been working to save the California sea otter, and you know, there are people out there, amazing people who get a passion, and they gather a group together of people with a similar passion, and they are changing the world. Because I travel 300 days a year all over the world, I'm really lucky to meet so many of these people and to see firsthand what can be done when people care. And I know that here in California, there are millions of people who care. Good for you. Go on caring. So, two last things. First of all around the world this year, there have been 48 major elections in 48 countries. And sadly, a lot of those elections have moved towards those who care more about making money now than the future of the planet and the future of our children. And so I've been saying as I go around the world, maybe a lot of young people just feel they're fed up with politics, so they're not going to vote. There's a lot of young people, particularly young people, or undecided people, who just think, well, it doesn't really make any difference, I'm not going to vote. And I'm wanting to say to you, and please share this message, your vote is important. If you can, register to vote. And choose the candidate who seems to care more for the future. It may not be your ideal person, but if it's a choice between two, choose the one who you think will do better for your children and theirs. So my last thing I want to say to you is a Roots and Shoots story, which I believe symbolizes what Roots and Shoots is all about, and why on this particular day, the International Day of Peace, we can look to the young people to a better future, where there will be less violence, less conflict. That's my hope. So this story is about the very first group of Roots and Shoots, started in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's in the eastern part of the country, which is where all the minerals are. So always there's one group of militia there, and then another group comes in and they fight, and another group takes over, but there's always a group of militia there. This group of young people, they were between 9 and 13, 14, something like that. And they decided for their first project, they wanted to put trees back on a hill that at one time they learned was a sacred hill, but now the trees have been cut down. Well, they didn't realize that actually this hill was much further away than they thought and much bigger than they thought. But their mentor didn't want to, damp their enthusiasm. So he went to a forester friend and got donated a whole lot of little saplings that they could plant. And then he went to the general of the militia that was ensconced there and said, is it okay if these children, there were 15 of them, is it okay if they go and plant trees on that hill? And the general said, well, it's a stupid idea, but I suppose there's no harm in it, but I have to send soldiers with you. So imagine this little group, 15 little children, touching their sapling, and I suppose something to dig with, and 4 big, strong Congolese soldiers with AK-47 rifles over their shoulder, going with them. Kind of ridiculous picture, isn't it? So they get there, and the ground is very hard, and the children are struggling to make a hole to plant their tree. And the youngest of them, a little girl of 9, she starts to cry. And within 10 minutes, one of the soldiers leans his gun against a tree and goes to help her. And within the next 10 minutes, all the soldiers had laid aside their guns and were helping the children to plant trees for the future of the planet. So, thank you, and I'm sorry if some of you couldn't hear, but I'm sure this has been recorded. So if you come up and tell us, we'll make sure you get a copy. I'm saying that's not my responsibility. I'm casting that responsibility out into the air. And thank you again for everybody who's made this possible. Everybody who worked today.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear. Happy birthday to
I want to say one more thing. I want to say one more thing. First of all, you all watched the parade. You probably didn't hear the words of the song. It was written by my great friend Dana Lyons, and it's called Circle the World. So because you didn't hear it, you can look it up again. You can Google it, or Cozier it, or something like that, because I think you will enjoy it. But I discovered when I went to Tanzania a few years ago that at the end of a gathering, the children from different schools, different groups of roots and shoots were standing together, and they were saying, "Together we can change the world." And I said, yes, we can, we know what to do, but do we have the will to do it? So then they started saying, together we can, together we will change the world. And I said, yes, together we can, together we will, because we must change the world. So if any of you believe this is true, and you join with me, I'll say it once more, together we can, together we will, together we must change the world. So, 1, 2, 3. Together we can, together we will, together we must change the world. Thank you.
That's a good